we bring in a friend who we've known for years and years and years. He's an author, relationship therapist, Dr. R.G. Allen Wilson.
Some expert advice on how we can all talk to them. Joining us now is relationship expert Dr. R.G. Allen Wilson. She's the author of Courageous Conversations Connect. Good morning, R.G.
Doctor, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, Janelle. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
And as we mentioned, a lot of people just dealing with anxiety during all of this. What are your suggestions?
Some of the things that we need to remember is that this is temporary. This is temporary inconvenience for long-term gain. And as long as we stay healthy, Janelle, then everything else is recoverable.
Talk to your children about what's happening right now. What are the best ways to do that?
There's some do's and don'ts, right? So you want to tell them that you're going to be here. We're going to be okay. Kids want to know that they're secure and they're safe. So predictability, structure, and consistency. You also want to let them know you have a plan. And even if you don't have a plan, tell them that you're working on one.
Good morning. This is Dr. RG, and this is Courageous Conversations Connect Space, where we are having our quarantine talks. It is May 27th, 2020. This is actually week 11 of our quarantine talks. I believe it's day 42 or something like that. I can't see it on my screen, but we've been doing this for a while. And so welcome IG family, welcome YouTube family, welcome Facebook family. Come on in, tag someone, let someone know that we're here. We're having our quarantine talks with our crew. It stands for Connecting Relationships for Epic Wins. And we're going to have a great conversation. I am so excited. We have a special guest. I'm going to tell you a little bit more when we come back, but his name is Bishop Shawn D. Bartley. I'm going to give you all the information on him. But remember, this week, we're specifically talking about how to break barriers and build bridges. And today, we're talking about institutional and structural barriers. I can't think of a better time. Just all the stars aligned based on what's going on in the world with the recent killings that we've experienced, along with what we're dealing with trauma with COVID-19. And so, listen, Bishop Shawn Bartley is going to help us unpack all of that. So stay with us. I see Larissa. I see Michelle Washington. I see you, IG family. Stay with us. We're going to take a quick break from our sponsors. We're going to be right back, and we're going to bring our special guest on. So stay with us. And I am back. This is Dr. RG, yours truly, going over to YouTube if you haven't done that yet, and hit subscribe to all of our content. Just hit the notification bell, if you will, so that you can get all of our notifications, as well as if you're on Facebook, I want you to type subscribe in the message box so that you can get all of our notifications. Well, without further ado, and good morning, Mama Scoats. We missed you. Without further ado, we are going to bring in a friend of both Morgan served as the director of admissions in 3 different schools, and he served as executive director as the first African-American president of Thompson Institute. And that's where I believe my husband and he met working at Kaplan and developed a budding friendship that has stood the test of time. Formerly known as the Kaplan Career Institute, which was a division of the Washington Post. So Thompson and Kaplan was the leading provider of allied health staffing for area hospitals such as Hahnemann, Jefferson, Einstein, Temple, and others. And under Bishop Bartley's leadership, this company experienced tremendous growth, listed as one of the largest campuses in the country under the Kaplan Institute. So without further ado, we want to bring on our special guest, Bishop Shawn D. Bartley. Welcome to the show, Bishop. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Dr. RG. And again, thank you for having me on the show. I'm just excited to be here today and to have this conversation that we're getting ready to have.
Yeah. I couldn't think of better timing, Bishop.
Wow.
To really talk about how we break barriers and build bridges and this structural and institutionalized barriers that we have in our country, really globally, and I can't think of a better person to have this conversation with. So again, thank you for joining us.
No, thank you.
Yeah. So listen, this is one of the things we do before we get into the conversation, Bishop, is we brief, right? And we ask our crew, which stands for Connecting Relationships for Epic Wins. We ask our crew to put in the chat who they're breathing for. So today, I'm breathing for George Floyd and the family and the friends of George Floyd. I'm also breathing for the family of Ahmaud Arbery, and also for Christian Cooper. In the last week, a couple of weeks, we've had Black men being attacked by white police officers, by white people, by white women. I don't even know if you saw the advertisement or the news about the woman in Central Park walking her dog and calling the police saying she was being attacked. So this is all about institutionalized and structural inequities and racism. And so that's who I'm breathing for. Who are you going to breathe for?
Certainly I'm breathing for my entire family and for every Black man that's out there today that feels marginalized, feels anxious, feel somehow disenfranchised. I'm breathing for everyone.
Awesome. So guys, everyone put in the chat who you're breathing for. What we do is we put our middle finger to our thumb or our hands on each other on our lap or on the sides. We get comfortable, and under the sound of my voice, I count to 3. We breathe in through our nose. We hold it for 10 seconds. We breathe out through our mouth, and this is how we start to kind of relax, moving into a better position so that we can have our conversation. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right.
No wiggle.
What'd you say?
No wiggle. No wiggle. Morgan said no wiggle. I noticed you left that out. Okay.
I wiggle.
Yo, man, come on.
Listen,
You're our friends, man. You killing me. You're killing my personal friends.
Listen, Dr. John Taylor said men can wiggle too, even though Morgan said no. So whatever you want to do, just get relaxed.
All right.
So under the sound of my voice, we're going to count to 3. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in. And breathe out. Through the mouth, we're going to breathe in oxygen, also kindness and love and serenity. Breathe in. And out through the mouth. Breathe in through the nose. And out. Breathe in. And out. Last time, make it count. Breathe in. And out. Great, great. That felt really good for me. I hope it felt good for you, Bishop, as well as all of our other folks in our crew that are breathing for various people. Larissa said, I'm breathing for those who still suffer from the coronavirus. Michelle Washington said, I breathe for the young Black boys that are growing up in this kind of society. Yeah, yeah. And Mama Nicole said, Nicole Stokes said, breathing for breath. Breathing for breath. So let's get into it. Bishop, last night, if you were watching the news or whoever was watching the news, we have to manage that because we have to manage our anxiety, so we can't watch all the time. But the last thing that I heard, and the video is certainly hard to watch, was George Floyd saying, I can't breathe. And he was literally calling for his mother.
Yeah.
According to his brothers, had passed away some time ago. But when you're in distress, you call for the person that's familiar to you, the person that you feel could possibly comfort you or to move you out of the space of distress that you're in. And he literally was calling for his mother while saying he couldn't breathe. And all the persons, bless God for the persons that videotaped it, right? And they have other videotape as well. I guess those will come out. And this is why I said in my post, keep videotaping, family, because we are now in a time where we have to shed light on what's been happening. This is not new. Black men being attacked, being assassinated by our, U.S. terrorists, as I would call it, not foreign terrorists right here in the United States. And much of this is related, I believe, to the institutional and structural barriers that have been set up for hundreds of years. This is not new. It looks maybe slightly different than what happened maybe in 1619 during slavery for 400 years, but it's not new. We understand that we have been in the community, we've been attacked for many years based on our differences and based on the policies. So when you think about the institutional and structural barriers, one of the definitions is that policies, procedures, and situations are systemically disenfranchise and disadvantage a certain group of people based on their minority situation, based on their differences. And so, when we think about these barriers, I'm curious as to what your thoughts were, Bishop, when you watched that, or when you began to perhaps hear commentary, maybe even from your congregation. How do you address that with the persons that you are responsible for when these incidents are happening? I call them fast and furious. It's happening more and more and more with persons with very little accountability, even with the runner, Ahmaud Arbery. He was just running, doing what most of us do. Morgan and I do this all the time. We check out locations where we're seeing different houses being built. That was not a crime. And yet he was gunned down in broad daylight by people who put out the tape and just said that they were going to justify it, that this was a justifiable act. What do you say to your congregants and those persons that are dealing with this every day?
This is a challenging situation, and there are no words that adequately help to comfort or reframe in the mind of our teenagers or young adults, young males, how to deal with something like this. Institutionally, we're supposed to look to the police for protection for everyone. But obviously that's not the case. This video was very difficult to watch. It's very difficult to watch a grown man taking his last breath, crying for his mother. And it was disturbing that the other police officer was so concerned about blocking the view of the camera so they would not videotape this, versus trying to encourage his partner to do the right thing, Again, proper procedure of arresting the fellow if he was going to do that, right? But he chose not to. And this is hard to reframe now to have young people trust, young Black men trust the police officer. I have three. I have boys. I have all boys. All right. I have three grown boys and one little man. And I tell them all. I said, listen, the crime today is being Black in America. That's where we are in 2020. And I have to caution you: the police officer pulls you over, obey everything. Do not argue. Do not say anything. Only because I don't want to be that parent. So this reached home for all of us. This is the dialogue I'm having with my sons. It's the dialogue I'm having with our young people in our church, in our community. This is just horrible. It's horrible, and there's no way to reframe this. This is clearly an injustice on every side. And the woman who called the police officer because she chose not to put a leash on her dog, thank God he had enough good sense to record, to tape the thing, right? Otherwise, who knows what she would have said.
Right.
And how that would have ended. This is a very difficult time. It saddens me, to say this is America in 2020. It's heartbreaking.
This is America in 2020. This is the state of our condition. And yet we as Black and brown people, and I would add, poor people as well, have to find some hope.
Yeah.
We lose hope, then it's kind of a wrap. So when we think about what we have to grab onto in order to continue to sustain ourselves, I heard Don Lemon say last night that we're fighting two viruses. We're fighting the coronavirus, but we're also fighting the racism virus, right? This disease or dis-ease around the state of our community, while simultaneously trying to make sense out of the nonsense. Trying to figure out a way that we have these talks with our children, with in particular boys, but also women are being on assault as well. How do we have it? And oftentimes, if it's not in the streets that we are assaulted, then it's often going to work and having these ways in which we are marginalized and othered and disenfranchised, even in the workplaces, being paid less money to do more work, having to deal with microaggressions on a regular basis, feeling as if our lives don't matter, and feeling, quite frankly, the rage that comes about when we feel like, well, what can we do? We can't breathe, we can't talk, we can't walk while Black, we can't drink coffee, we can't golf, we can't run. So what can we do? How do you have the conversation, Bishop, about what we're seeing with our very own eyes, while simultaneously trying to maintain some level of hope that there can be some justice for us?
Well, I spent over 30 years in corporate America, and I understand, women make up a large portion of our workforce, just like in the church, women make up a large portion of the church. And so, in corporate America, let's face fact, a lot of the CEOs and a lot of the people in high ranking positions are males. And ultimately, to build teams, they oftentimes build second and third and fourth in command with their male counterparts, their friends that they go golfing with or they hang out with on weekends. And then they, in order to create some diversity or to create some equality, they add a few people of Black or brown for complexions and a few of females in the process. But the reality is the social expectation is different. The landscape is different as it relates to camaraderie and relationship, and therefore information flow. Secondly, I have personally seen inequalities in pay scales, and pay scales in terms of what level they bring someone in. So there's always that glass ceiling, and it's camouflage. Well, let's see what they're able to do before we pay them what we think the position is worth. What? You know what I mean? It's camouflage in a different way, but there's definitely a glass ceiling. And you know, or sometimes it takes our female counterparts longer to move up. Oh, because she has other responsibilities. We can't give her positions that require so much commitment. You know, she may take off for family, take off for, you know, other things that are also important to a female, but also important to society, right? And so there's definitely an uneven landscape where some of those institutional barriers are concerned. And so one of the things I try to coach females on for a very long time is focus on your performance. You have to become the champion of your own cause. You have to be pointing to your performance level compared to your counterparts. You have to, and let's face facts, when you're black or brown or female, a minority group of any sort, you have to walk in knowing you will have to do twice as much in order to be seen. That's your reality. That's your reality, and you have to do it. That was my reality, and I had to do it in order to even be considered to become the first African-American president for Thompson Institute at the time. That's our reality, and Morgan knows this well.
Yeah. And so one of the things I say, and I appreciate that very much, I want to hear some more questions and stories from some of our crew. If you have questions for Bishop Bartley, please share them, or please ask them, or share your specific stories about the times in which perhaps you have experienced institutionalized or structural barriers with it, whether it be in the workplace, whether it be in your faith-based institutions, whether it be in your community. You know, how did you deal with that? Because those barriers basically block us. You know, it either prevents us from elevation, you know, that glass ceiling that you speak about, Bishop, or they block us from moving. Yet, you know, the thing about a block is that, you know, that prevents us from perhaps moving forward, but then we have to figure out ways to be strategic. If we allowed those systems to keep us down, we would still be in the spaces that we were, you know, hundreds of years ago.
Amen.
Right? But we found ways, and for many persons of color, they found their hope in spirituality. They found their hope in some level of religion. They found their hope in each other. They found their hope in God, or whatever it is that, you know, whatever system that they felt was their source. For me as a Christian, it has been God, and that's passed down from generation to generation. And yet, you know, we have to keep having this conversation, you know, and then we have to call ourselves to action and call others to accountability. I often say that, you know, love, light, truth, and accountability leads to hope and freedom, right? Mm-hmm. Now, once we acknowledge that those are the, you know, the factors that help us to get to a level of hope and freedom, then we still have to pay attention to the reality. Because I think that oftentimes, you know, when we don't pay attention to the reality, or we act as if it's not happening, then we continue to get traumatized over and over and over again. People were talking specifically about watching the video, which was hard to watch. And I thought to myself, well, yeah, this is hard to watch, but I guess it was also pretty hard to experience.
Absolutely. That's a good position right there. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Bishop, when you think about, and I'm going to shift this to the whole conversation about both wearing masks, because that's a divide that's happening within our culture, whether you wear a mask or whether you don't. There's another conversation happening even in the state of Pennsylvania about the doors of church institutions or faith-based institutions opening, not just churches, but all faith-based institutions opening. And I had heard even from my pastor on Sunday, like, the church was never closed. You know, that the faith-based institutions, whatever institution it is in the ordinance of your faith, is essential. It's just that we worshiped differently in reach, outreach, and upreach. So can you speak a little bit to how to navigate the emotional presence of ourselves when we are dealing with these decisions of wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, going into church or opening church doors or not opening church doors as people of color or people who are marginalized?
Well, let me start with the church door portion. Let's say again, I think across the country, I have counterparts that had services on Sunday and limited the number, and they exercise caution, etc. I think every situation is going to be uniquely different and needs to be examined. However, the one thing's for sure, our communities need faith. And I agree, our churches have never been closed. We just redefined what service and worship look like, all right? Many of our churches have been on the front line, helping to perform a lot of essential work, giving out foods, helping older folks get medication, medication and food and whatever they needed to ensure that they stay home. And so I know in our churches, we had some of the younger ones providing for meals, etc., for some of the older ones. So again, churches have never been closed. So let's put that to the side for a second. However, the reopen and reentry, it's the bottom line is our responsibility, and I feel it too, is towards ensuring the safety of our people. Ensuring the safety of our people and ensuring that when we open, we have a sustainable plan. So again, last weekend was actually frightening because we saw a number of people out in the beaches and out in other places, not practicing social distancing. They were just partying, having a good time. And ultimately, they're going back to homes with people in there, right? And ultimately, those individuals are older mothers, older family members are coming to church, right? And so, again, these are the concerns that we all have. Across this week, I'm getting on a couple of conference calls with other pastors in other churches talking about re-entry plan, not reopening, but re-entry plan, what service is going to look like, what are going to be the do's and don'ts, and so that we systematize our re-entry plan and ultimately go with something that has caution built into it, all right? Because ultimately it's protection of ourselves, the congregation, and our community that we're concerned about. Now, let's talk about the mask situation. Again, this is a hot debate these days, especially since our president has, chosen to not wear a mask, and and he's got to know why he's not doing it. Nonetheless, the one is ensuring appropriate masks. Now, let's talk about our communities. One of the things I've noticed, if you don't have a proper mask, and I saw this demonstrated, a lot of people are using, the more disposable, cheaper mask. But if you light a lighter and they say if you can blow through the mask and out the lighter, it's the wrong one. However, a lot of our people who are struggling financially during this time are going to the local store, dollar store, and purchasing these masks because everybody's selling masks now. And now we have to test those masks. I have a shipment of masks that was given to us, and I said, before we distribute it, let's test that. Let's ensure that this thing actually works like it's supposed to before we give it to somebody else, right? And give them a sense of false hope. So again, this is a real issue. I know institutionally, everyone's going to have to wear a mask, no question. The real issue, though, as it relates to COVID-19, is not just the physical mask. Right? It's also the psychological mask. What are we really masking behind the mask? What pain, what brokenness, what abuse? We're going on, almost 3 months lockdown. People who are in homes that are abusive. What does that mean? And what are we really masking behind all of this? That's what really needs to be addressed. There's also the institutional mask. What do I mean by that? Well, recently we saw bailouts to a number of different groups. However, some of the real small businesses that make up a great portion of those who hire our people in our community in the service industry, they didn't get a bailout. They didn't get any kind of funding. And I will add, healthcare workers had to fight to just get the proper PPEs that they need to perform essential service. Lastly, and you're going to love this one, Dr. A, mental health care workers. What bailout was given to them? In a time when our entire world is experiencing trauma, what support did you and others like you get?
Zero.
Exactly. And I'm gonna tell you, I'm a pastor, a person of faith. I've been in the church for 3/4 of my life, and being home in this quarantine environment, the first couple of weeks was driving me crazy. I had to turn the television off because I was newsed out. It was bringing too much fear, too much anxiety. They were changing the facts. 1 week, wear a mask. 2 weeks later, don't wear a mask. 3 weeks later, go back to a mask. Wear a glove, don't wear a glove. I was confused. I turned it off. I listened to essential news, and that's it. That's it, because it was messing with my mental state. I can't have fear overriding my faith, not in this time, all right? And so I had to have conversations with me in order to have conversations with my congregants. People depend on me for inspiration. I have to be inspired in order and to be in a proper mental place in order to provide what they need.
Wow. Wow. That's, thank you, Bishop, for that, because that kind of really leads me to my next thought process with you, with regards to how do you manage or how do you process your own mental wellness, and for you and other clergy. I mean, that's been a passion of mine for many years. My dissertation was on the church and the attitudes, values, and beliefs of clergy in particular. Church leaders as it relates to mental health seeking behavior. I'm a church girl. I grew up in church, right? And I always wondered why it was that if we were going to the church every day, well, sometimes when we were a kid, it was every day, or, we were at church, right? If we were going there, then I just wondered as a kid, like, well, then why do people seem so distressed, right? It didn't kind of add up. The audio didn't match the video for me. And so then as an adult, I started thinking to myself, like, well, if this is the church place, this is the place for healing, yet you've got these mental health professionals. This is what Dr. Evans said, that in every faith-based community, you have mental health professionals, but in every mental health facility, you have people of faith. So why weren't we linking up? Why weren't we connecting? What was that about? And I really wanted to understand where, because we listen, people of faith, we listen to our church leaders. What was the messaging from church leaders about mental health seeking behavior? And if the messaging wasn't a positive message, because we've heard these things before in our culture, you don't air your dirty laundry in public. And if you're having some mental health issues or some relational issues, you just need to pray harder. That means you are of little faith, if you will. And so what I wondered is, like, well, why aren't our leaders collaborating with our mental health professionals to not only help their congregants, but this is really, really important, to help them? Because I believe that there's a lot of pressure that's on church, faith-based community leaders, if you will. And so you all need support as well. How do you wrap your mind around that? What's your messaging or thought process about what help clergy may need? And how do you then give that message to your community about what's going on these days?
Yeah. So again, you hit on a couple of important points. One, in the evolution of church, there has been some negative stereotype as it relates to mental health, right? And congregants who have mental health issues, sometimes bipolar, et cetera, would not always feel comfortable identifying themselves with particular mental health challenges because they'll be stereotyped. They would be avoided. They would be passed over as not being competent, right? Or stable, or other words like that. And so there has been those challenges within the church because the church has not always had a fond view of mental health and ultimately those who serve in those industries. However, as society has moved from this agricultural society, the information society, and now today with this complex society, more and more of us are feeling stressed. So before it was always somebody else. Now it's your family member. Maybe it's you that's experiencing some mental health challenges. And with COVID-19, let's face facts. People are quarantined in small spaces, and in some of us, they're sharing. People have moved into family homes in order to share resources. This is causing friction. It's causing mental health challenges. It's flushing out all the issues that people were able to avoid before because they went to work. So as clergies, all of us are not only now that we're not just worshiping physically and have, sometimes we use that to disguise the real issues, right? We used to say we shout over our problems. Now the problems are surfacing. So more and more, we're seeing the need to partner, which is part of the reason I'm on this show today, is to partner and to let us embrace, we're doing the faith work, but you're also doing the mental health healing work. All right. We're able to inspire, we're able to instruct, but ultimately, if the person is not mentally healthy, they're going to struggle in their faith. They're going to struggle. They're going to say, I believe it, but I don't have the power or energy or the will to perform it. Jesus says, don't just become a hearer, become a doer. I can't become a doer if I have mental challenges, if I'm not healthy within, if I'm not feeling myself. All right. And let's face facts. Sometimes by the time people come to the church door and get saved, it's ultimately, I always say people get called either by inspiration or by desperation. And many of us get called to the church by desperation. We were going through difficult seasons in our life that shifted us. We did not like what we were seeing in ourselves, and the necessity to change was obvious. And we came to the church door saying, I need God, but I need to change. I no longer like me. Well, there is a spiritual side to that. But truthfully, there's also a mental and emotional side to that. So we find a lot of pastors are now having to try to do both. Well, quite frankly, I learned a long time ago, if you become a jack of all trades, you become a master of none. So, what I try to do, what I try to do is stay in my lane. My wife says, I would ask you to fix that stuff, but I know you're not handy. So I'll leave you with your Bible and your books, and I'll call the plumber.
Call a plumber. Call somebody else.
And I say, that's a good idea, darling. No, staying in our lane. I do think, one of the blessings of the virus is that it's causing us to bridge those gaps and recognize that we need holistic healing. We need spiritual healing, and we need emotional healing. We need the kind of therapy that ultimately help people create sustainable change. Our motto in our church is anointed to create change, because we believe that when you come and connect with us in 6 or so months, you should see visible change that you're proud of, visible change that you're willing to testify about, visible change that will ultimately be visible to other people. In order for that to happen, we need collaboration on the spiritual side as well as the personal side. And that's where you come in, Dr.
Oh, amen. I love that. I love that. Yeah. So Morgan has a question from someone. Morgan,
Sure.
question?
Actually, I have a question. Bishop, wanted to know, now that we're in this pandemic, some of the arguments or conversations taking place within the clergy about what it's going to take for the church to come back and what is going to be the new normal for the church. And as you know, many of the church have been resistant to new technology. Now they're being forced, and they're so behind the 8 ball. How do they catch up, one, and or if they can't ever catch up? Because we know that the Black church specifically, there's going to be a lot of Black churches never coming back from this. So one, what are you doing specifically to kind of mitigate that directly for you and maybe anybody else within your circle? Because there might be a question when I think you mentioned that you guys want to talk at some point, you and some other people get together, and I'm quite sure it's going to be a theme of the conversation. How does the Black church protect themselves? And what can they do to get ahead of new technology, and what's going to be the new normal as relates to the Black church within our community?
I'll say this, Morgan, thank you for the question. And it's certainly a question that all of us are circling the wagons on. What is the church going to look like post-quarantine? And ultimately moving forward. I think you've seen some churches have embraced technology, have become good at technology, and ultimately are going to be able to create a hybrid. Let's face facts. There are some people who are going to be concerned, who are not going to be coming to the doors when they're able to, when the churches re-enter their physical space. They're not going to be coming because they're going to be like, you know what, I want to wait and see. And so in order to serve that population, we're going to have to use technology. We're going to have to use some hybrid of physical experience along with a virtual experience. And some people have become comfortable with that virtual experience. They're growing and experiencing growth, and they're visual learners, and they're okay with that. So that's certainly part of what I also think, Morgan, to answer your question. There are some churches who are not going to make it after this, and I think the responsibility also rests on those churches who have mastered the technology to help some of these smaller churches, to help some of these smaller groups learn what it takes to minister to their congregation and minister to their community using technology. So just like you guys, I've watched the evolution here on the RG show with technology, But I think
yes, sir.
So I think is going to be a hybrid. And you know what? You've built a strong, some churches have built a strong audience. They're not only just surviving, they're thriving during this quarantine. And so I think it's going to be important to keep that level of engagement going even after they've gone back into the physical space. So it's going to result in a hybrid. We're going to need some of the churches who have mastered this to share information, to share classes. And then lastly, what is church going to look like? Let's face facts. Our church function on intimacy. I mean, when you come to my church in Tree United, we not only recognize visitors, we have an opportunity where we walk around and hug each other, greet each other, love on each other. Because I learned a long time ago, you don't know what a person had been through Monday through Saturday and what it took even Sunday morning just to get through that door. All right. So when they make it into the space, love on them, let them feel comfortable. Now, all of a sudden, and I'm a hugger. I hug strangers. They look at me like, oh, Lord, because they're not accustomed to somebody who don't. But it's the way I demonstrate love. I'm touchy-feely like that. And so now I realize in this new norm, we won't be able to do that with social distancing. And so we're going to have worship. We're going to praise God. It's going to be upward, Dr. RG. But in terms of being outward, it's going to be a little strange. It's going to be a little different. In my church, we have an altar call for sinners, but we also an opportunity for the saved folks to come up and get ministered to. Because week after week, people are experiencing trauma. They're dealing with challenges. They're dealing with crises. And we would pray with them. We would have them tell us what they're going through, minister to them. We'd lay hands. Now in this social distancing, we're going to lay virtual hands. These are real issues, and people have become accustomed to the ministry of laying of hands. Now that can't happen like it has in the past. So this is all going to be new norms. On this week, I'm on a couple of calls discussing that issue and how we're going to really minister to the human need. At the end of the day, people come to churches for spiritual need, but you know what? The number one thing, they come for a sense of family, a sense of belonging, a sense of empowerment, a sense of endearment. They need those intangibles that they experience just being in worship. It's why Jesus said, do not forsake the assembling of yourself, because I have church virtually. In fact, on Sundays, I visit 7 churches. I can't do that physically. I can do that virtually. But you know what? It's not the same as being in the space. It's not the same. I can't feel what I need to feel that I get from my environment. And that's going to be the challenge.
That's the term. That's the challenge of how do you do high tech without losing high touch. So it's high tech versus high touch. And that really is the argument right now. Discussion that's going on right now. How do you manage that? How do you deal with that? Like you said, that you're touchy, feely. I mean, that's really, what church is all about, embracing one another, not just spiritually, but also physically. And I think that's one of the challenges that the church is having, embracing the high tech without losing the high touch.
So all of us are learning engagement techniques. I watched Dr. RG engaging with her listeners, or engaging with those who are watching the show. calling their names, using other methods other than physical touch to ensure engagement, create empowerment where people walk away feeling they have gained something from the experience. So I think, one, we've lost some things. No question, COVID-19 has robbed us of some of those things. However, it's not all lost. We are now getting better at engagement. We're getting better at empowerment. We're getting better at being clear with people what to expect from the experience, so that they know what to look for and ultimately gain from it. We have to become clear on that, because it's no longer the personal side won't exist. That's just a reality. It's gone, at least in the short run. Right. Again, some churches are not going to survive because ultimately, in the landscape of things, people are distracted. So their sense of commitment to their personal house may not have been there in the first place. Maybe they attended there, but their sense of commitment was not there. And those are the individuals I think, may not return. But ultimately, the core of the church, we're going to come back. We're going to figure out ways to get to do this and to do ministry with a new norm, and we're going to become better at it. Listen, in the last 3 months, the whole world has become better at technology and embracing this new virtual reality. Hey, would I even be on this show if it wasn't for that? It's reality, right?
Exactly.
It's
I love it. I love it.
Reality.
Thank you, Bishop. Thank you, Bishop. We are going to take a quick break from our sponsors, and then we're going to come right back, and we're going to continue this conversation, and we're going to go into a little bit of meaty conversation about those loved ones that are either away by a nursing home or incarcerated. So stay with us, okay? All right, so we are back with the Courageous Conversations Connect space, and this is the Quarantine Talks. We have been having Bishop Shawn D. Bartley of Trinity United Church on with us, and we've been having a spirited conversation with our crew, connecting relationships for epic wins. All week, we're talking about breaking barriers and building bridges. I think this is a timely conversation for this week, and particularly today, we've been talking about the structural and institutionalized barriers. I can think of a better person who's worked 30 years in the industry of institutions, academic institutions, educational institutions, and then also within the church community. And so, Bishop Bartley, again, thank you for joining us with this conversation. I'm interested, we're going to shift a little bit to at least hopefully giving us a little bit of your thoughts and what you believe may be helpful tips for your congregants or for other persons who are dealing with persons who are incarcerated, where community spread is happening and you can't get to your loved one. We know that that's an institution, right? The prison system is sometimes, there's been a pathway to the prison system, and where those persons don't have the same privileges and access that we have when we're not behind bars, as well as perhaps our loved ones who may be in nursing homes or hospitals. I've seen more and more persons who are posting that they can't get to their loved one in the hospital or advocate for them, or they can't get to their loved one in the nursing home. So they're experiencing Mother's Day or Father's Day, but through the window. There's a barrier there, where you're having to engage with your person through a window or through a screen, if you will. Yes, we have this technology, but like you just said, it's not the same. And so how are you talking with the persons that you're inspiring to help them to deal with those particular kinds of barriers?
Well, it's emotionally difficult during this season. Some of the things that I have heard from congregants and community individuals, is one, they couldn't even get to the nursing home. And so sometimes they weren't even sure as to the real state their family member was in. during all of this. Some of the nursing home in this quarantine has been less transparent, so to speak, about what's really going on in the nursing home. So, anxieties were high, helping to navigate all of that and trying to get to persons in the nursing home that was willing to disclose, because in some cases they couldn't come to the window and they weren't able to actually see a family member through a window, and they weren't even able to connect with them virtually. So this has been a very difficult season, and really just praying with people, encouraging them, trying to stay positive, along with those who lost family members in all of this, and the trauma associated because they never got to say goodbye, those last words. It reminds us, Dr. RJ, that all of us need to live our life each day just fixing whatever issues exist, because I found the greatest trauma among the individuals who had bad relationships with their family member. Now they're gone, and literally they feel that I can't fix this. I can't fix this. They're gone. I really love them, but I made my emotions get ahead of me. So these again are difficult season, and we're trying to help them navigate through the emotional side of this. Let's switch our conversation to the prison system. Again, our prison system has been a little confusing in terms of how they are managing the crisis, the COVID-19 crisis. On one hand, they seem to have, in some states, let go individuals, right, and allow them come home. So for those families, it was great. And there are a few cases where, and I've heard it from community individuals, where they were supposed to be sent home, but the prison system changed their mind in interpreting the rules and said, move them back into general population, where people who were tested positive are. So this has been devastating because it feels like, hey, they're serving their time, but it's almost like they have no rights. And so the family member is having a difficult time, like, what can I do, if anything? In our church, we have a prison ministry where individuals are certified to go behind bars and to kind of communicate. We've had to stop that completely. So the inroads into those systems are now no longer, there's a barrier there. And, after this, who knows how we're going to bridge that barrier. So there's a lot of confusion and a lot of hurt, a lot of anxiety, a lot of pain, a lot of confusion, because even the prison system is confused in how to carry out the mandates that were given to, or the directions that were given to them in terms of dealing with COVID-19 in the prison system. So this has just been challenging. When you look in the Black community, because we have so many people of color in the prison system, this institution, in trying to manage behavior, we've just locked up people. And that's a whole nother conversation, Doctor, because I'm a firm believer. Paul wrote to the book in Romans and says, if you want to manage behavior, train different belief systems, change the belief systems, and you'll end up with different behaviors. All right. But instead of using therapy, or instead of using mental health approaches to change belief systems, we just imprison folks and manage their behavior. And ultimately, confining people does not really create true reform, right? True reform. So I was on a call with Washington, D.C., a division that's trying to create better engagement for education in the prison system. And I'm an advocate. Let's get them educated, because if they can become educated when they come back out in society, they can be meaningful in terms of having some of the barriers removed and build the bridges while they're in, keep them so busy in prison studying that they don't have time for the other stuff, right? Give them something to not just survive, but learning how to thrive in their quarantine reality. So that's where I am on this. I'm advocating for it really big, and I'm working behind the scene with some policymakers that can make this happen. I'd like to see an education model spread across the country and tested in several things. One of my son has a lot of his training in recidivism. He's done a lot of work, and he's a young fellow, but very committed to ensuring second chances. He's just really big on that. And so it has really not only become a community thing for me, it's become a personal thing because of his commitment to the issue.
Wow. Yeah. Years ago in my early career, I worked in the prison as a family therapist, and worked on at CFCF on State Road and Riverside and Pick. They called it playground. And the reason why they called it that was because the recidivism rate was so high, and you
Revolving door.
had grandmothers, mothers, and granddaughters on the same cell block. And the first time, Bishop, that I worked in the prison, the first day that I went in there, I left there and I sat in my car and I wept because I could not believe that there were so many. I guess I was naive that there were so many Black and brown people. And I thought to myself, Black and brown people are not the only people that are committing crimes, right? But yet we're the ones that are in there because of the inequities in the legal system and that lack of access that we have. Therefore, we're the ones that end up there. There were women in there, and their only crime was that they hooked up with the wrong guy, got hooked on drugs, and they violated their probation. So now they're in for 18 to 28 months, and they have children on the outside. So my job was to work with the families, be on the outside, videotape them, bring the tape to my client on the inside, videotape them, and take it back and forth. That was my job.
Wow.
And it was wonderful work that was really spearheaded and created by Dr. Marlene Watson, who was my mentor and good friend. She wrote a wonderful book called, oh boy, wait a minute. What is the name of the book? I'll come back with it.
We'll Google it.
I should know this, right? But nevertheless, my point is about, this institutionalized oppression and inequities is that we have to figure out how to bridge that gap. And these are the thing that I learned when I was so young was that we're humans, right? That we have mothers and daughters and children and family members that love us just the same. And that the difference is in many cases the color of our skin or the color of our pocketbook, the money that we have that prevents us from being able to have the access. That's it. Those are the differences. And subsequently, that makes the world of difference with regards to whether we get health equity, whether we get resources. And even today, in this day and time, in 2020, when we're in the middle of a pandemic, we can't even get proper testing.
Hello.
You've got COVID, the Black Doctors Consortium going out every other day when they have regular jobs, but they're going out in the city of Philadelphia to test persons who are hardworking people that can't get tested. That's a travesty.
It is.
So, go ahead.
Dr. Archie, as we get to the end of COVID-19, the cash register for America has been depleted because of not collecting taxes over the last 3 months. All the groups that have not been able to generate an income and ultimately pay taxes. The overran unemployment system. There's still people who are waiting for unemployment checks that hasn't seen one, and making me wonder, is there really money in the till anymore? Because the system wasn't built for this. They're re-looking at the states and how to fund education coming into this fall quarter. What kind of budget cutbacks are we going to see? But interestingly enough, when I was on the conversation with Washington on the prison system, they were talking about funding, not cutting back, funding that system more, because they're expecting more people to be incarcerated during the COVID period. Now, that's interesting. We're cutting back on education. We have health issues that people don't have proper medical health. They're not going to the doctors because they can't afford it. They have substandard health systems that they've prescribed to because of their finances, but yet we're funded. So again, the priority from an institutional standpoint is going to be very interesting past as this COVID-19 ends.
Yeah, and so all the more reason for us, and the book is Facing the Black Shadow by Dr. Marlene Watson. It's an amazing book. I don't know why I couldn't remember the name in the moment, but it's about how it is that we have shifted from the externalized racism to internalized racism, and that the behaviors in which we exhibit are a manifestation of the messaging that others had of us that over time became the messaging of us not feeling worthy, not feeling enough, not feeling that we are valued, or quite frankly, that we are devalued in many ways. And so that then becomes the shift, if you will, of the behaviors that we often see. And that needs to be addressed both by, I believe, clergy within faith-based organizations, as well as clinicians such as myself, to really help us really think about this. This is not how we started. You know, we didn't start thinking poorly of ourselves, but over time, that internalized racism became very structural within our psyche, and subsequently has implications for how in which we behave.
Well said.
Yep. And Thea Elliott says, this is taking me back to my 10 years working Riverside Prison with pregnant women and moms, as well as their families on the inside and outside. It's terrible. I feel you, my sister, she said. Yeah, that's why I wept, because, you know, it's just, when you see it, you know, and you know, it does something different to you. And then you have to sort of, you know, that goes back, Bishop, to trying to access our faith so that we don't allow our fear to govern us. And we stay in the fight, because this is a fight that we're in. A fight for our livelihood, for our families, for our communities, and the structure and the institutions have not served people such as us, Black and brown and poor people, very well. But we've got to stay in the fight.
It's definitely a fight. And I'll go back. We're fighting two enemies. Both are unseen. And the mask today is not just the physical mask, but it's the institutional mask. It's what's really behind the institutional mask. What is the real cover up here? And I'm going to say this was one comment. I was born outside the country, and you'll hear it in some words. I was born in a beautiful island of Jamaica, and at 16 years old, I migrated. And in Jamaica, we have classism based on economics, socioeconomics. We don't have racism. It's a melting pot of all different kinds. On one side of my family, I have Jewish folks on one side, and again, it's a melting pot in Jamaica. When I came here, my first experience, I went to college, and I went to the cafeteria on the first day, and I got my lunch. I turned around and I looked around, and all of a sudden there were people segmented based on color. I'd never seen this level, and I was confused. I said, "Where do I sit? I'm Jamaican. Where do I sit?" Right? So wow. That's interesting. As I began to transition in the United States and learn this, racism and learn sexism and learn all the other things that were a part of the society, my son gave me a book to read. It's called The Miseducation of the Black Negro. And he says, "Dad, read this because it will change your perspective and it will refocus you on the real mission." The reason the church preaches survival so much is because we have to undo 6 days of institutional slavery over the minds of our people, over the hearts of our people, and over the family life. A lot of the people I pastor come from single family homes, come from where there's no male representation. Sometimes I'm the only male, or the church leaders are the males that they look up to, or, of course, they have these idols from basketball, but they're not touchable. All right. And so, again, these are the things that we fight, and it's an invisible enemy that's going to be masked. But the reality is having major social impact on our society.
Yes. Thank you so much. This is what we're going to, I appreciate you so much. I appreciate this conversation. I know that you and Morgan have been friends for life. For life, right. And I'm just
listen, man. I told you, Bartley, I have something that you and I put together. I can't wait. 30 some odd years ago. So I want to make sure that when we transition this thing, I want to give it to you. You're going to be so surprised. I still have this document. It's a document. Man. Remember, you and I used to sit in my car. We used to dream, man. So.
Quite honestly, he and I used to sit around and not having a lot of role models. We would pull from each other. We'd sit and take our lunch break in his car, and we'd listen to inspiration, Zig Ziglar and other inspirational tape recorders back then, and talk about how we're going to apply that, and literally in his car plan our future. Plan
Yes.
our future, literally. You know,
Yes.
dream of a day different than our current reality.
Exactly.
And look, I turned around now, and we're living the dream.
Living it.
We're living
Living
the
it
dream.
right now. Exactly.
We're living the dream.
Exactly that. So I'm gonna make sure you get that document, man. It's a surprise,
Absolutely.
man. Surprise.
Absolutely.
Make sure you get
Love you,
that.
bro.
Thank you.
Hey, and you need to let Dr. RJ at least have one dog, okay?
Man, you are good. Oh man, come on, bro. You killing me. You are the fire here, man. You're gonna be bringing families together, not instigating disruption.
No, man, I'm practicing cruise.
Thank you, Bishop. I appreciate
Breaking
it.
barriers.
Oh my goodness, man. Oh man, but thanks anyway, man. We're gonna have to transition out of here, man.
Conversation's been meaningful. Dr. RJ, I love you. You're doing a great job. I want to encourage you to continue to do that. I'm driving as much traffic to your show. This is the kind of stuff people need to set their morning off with. All right.
Thank you so much, Bishop, and I appreciate you. Give my love to your lovely wife and for being on. All right. Oh yeah, this is information. We'll post a little bit later as well.
Sure. Appreciate it. Thank you. God bless you.
All right, blessings, guys. We will see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. And so set your dials and your notification for that on the Ask Dr. RG Courageous Conversations Connect space where we're having our quarantine talks. We love you. There's nothing you can do about it. Have a beautiful day on purpose from our heart.
Amen.